The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame. Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I am joined this week by one very cool co-host,
Nate Heininger.
Thank you, Nate. And this week we're talking about a game called Death Crown. This game came out late last year. I didn't actually hear about it until pretty recently, but I was interested because it's a genre that we don't usually find a lot of short games in, and that's a real-time strategy game. Death Crown is a real-time strategy game that's very stripped down and gives you a campaign that you can play beginning to end in about 2 hours, which is a really rare thing to find.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it later in the episode when we really dig into the mechanics, but I have had a place in my heart for RTS games for like my entire existence of playing video games. And there's a sort of an argument you can make that like any individual sit down with an RTS is a game that respects your time. We could probably fit them into like our roguelike, exemption that we make.
That's a barn door that we've left wide open for too long, and I am slamming it here and now. We cannot say that just because you play the game for 2 hours at a time over the course of a 100-hour thing does not count. So,
listen,
no.
I'm agreeing with you. Even though I am now on hour like 150 of Slay the Spire,
yes,
and the new character just came out, so I was almost done. But what I was gonna say though is that the reason that argument even falls apart though is like the campaigns on those games usually are pretty long. A lot of the RTS games come with campaigns, and they're a lot of fun. And they are often many, many hours spread over a very, very long and sprawling campaign. Whereas this game really does. I mean, I think it took me like an hour and a half to beat this whole game.
Yeah, you were better at it than I was. I think I played a lot of these levels many more times than you did based on our conversation earlier.
Yeah, but even if you had to play the game over and over and over, I think one match, if you will, is like 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like a hallmark of most RTSs is it is like a sprawling push pull, that like you're really just trying to get the upper hand on someone, and a win may take, quite a long time unless you're doing some sort of like rush tactic. And this one, win or lose, it's gonna be done within just a couple minutes, and that's really hard to pull off in RTS games.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are obviously a lot of things to talk about with the specifics of how this game does its unusual take on real-time strategy. But before we dive into that, I want to talk about the visuals of the game, because they are absolutely the thing that drew me to this game, and also the thing that I think is going to make it stand out the most in if you're scrolling through Steam. I've talked several times on this show about how uniquely weak I am to 1-bit pixel art, black and white graphics, right? Everything from Minute to I could name a whole bunch. Obra Dinn is a perfect example. Yeah. And although that was like 3D passed through a filter that gave it a 1-bit pixel art style, but essentially the same thing. Anything with that like old school first generation Macintosh, 1-bit dithering for shading, visual style, just absolutely works for me. It's just a visual style that I really love. And it's also of the sort of retro pixel art styles, it's probably the rarest. You don't see, there's certainly games that do it. And we've played a number of them on the show. I think the most recent would probably be Gato Roboto.
Yeah.
But there's just not a lot of people working in this style because it's extraordinarily hard. Doing really intricate graphics in 1-bit pixel art style, I'm not an artist, but just think about the challenge of I need a sprite, a character to be able to stand out against a background. My background might be fairly detailed, but it's also made up of only black and white pixels. And my foreground character needs to be able to stand out against that complex background, but it's also only black and white pixels. How do you accomplish that? It's a big, big challenge.
And, in this case, where this game also manages to make metal as hell cutscenes entirely out of 1-bit pixel art.
Right. Yeah. That's the other big part of this, is that it's not just 1-bit pixel art graphics. I mentioned Gato Roboto. You would never look at this and say, oh, that looks just like Gato Roboto. What this looks like to me is that somebody sat down and drew like a bunch of really kick-ass metal album covers in Macintosh Paint 1985.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also the thing I think that this game does so well, and it's just kind of layering on top of what you just said, is like in our RTS, there's usually a lot of things going on. And this game is no different. You are managing resources, you're managing a field of battle, if you will. You're managing different terrain types, all these different things, and it is all in 1-bit, and it's all layered on top of each other. And for the most part, you can very quickly gauge this, look at the screen and understand what's going on and what you need to be doing. It's really successful at keeping everything separate and identifiable. And it also has some really cool maps that they do entirely in 1-bit. There's a world map that you're selecting your sort of your battles from. And it reminded me a little bit of like the world map from something like Hyper Light Drifter, where it's like a whole bunch of different things sort of crammed together and doesn't really represent like a real world, but it's like representative of different areas of a world, and it's all in 1-bit though, and really you can spend some time looking at it.
Yeah, it is very, very successful at making this very complex game work with this very, very simplified art style, or not simplified exactly, but like really constrained, right? There are definitely times, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit once we get down into talking about the specifics of how the game works from the gameplay side more. But like there definitely were times in this game where I felt like I was missing information. Like there's a lot to take in. You mentioned like RTS games, they're busy, right? There's a lot going on screen at any one time, and sometimes I did feel that like things that I would have liked to be more instantly readable were not very readable because they were in black and white. So for example, like if one of your buildings is being attacked, it can sometimes be hard to spot that when the enemy characters are these incredibly tiny black and white dudes that are really small on screen. And it's not like anything's like turning red or blinking when your buildings are being attacked. It's actually a lot more subtle looking than that. So there are definitely times where this art style that I really, really like potentially works against the game in terms of gameplay, but I think that's kind of just part of it. Like this is clearly just like something that they designed around, and that is part of the challenge. In some RTS games, you kind of deceive your opponent by launching attacks on multiple fronts. And maybe the way that you obfuscate that is by spreading them out. Well, here, everything happens on a single screen. There's no scrolling around these maps. So if you're going to obfuscate something, if you want to kind of slip something past somebody, maybe the fact that all of this stuff is part of a very busy black and white image that can sometimes be a little difficult to really take in all at once, maybe that's part of the design, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think that's more a result of the pace of this game and less of the art design.
Maybe so.
Everything is happening so fast and in such a small window that really by time your individual buildings are being attacked, it's probably too late to really save that building. I think this game it's almost like bigger than that as far as the strategy goes. If you're spending your time really trying to like beat by beat manage that degree, like what buildings are being attacked and trying to counter that individual building rather than sort of treating it as like entire zones, then I think you're probably going to be beaten before you can even realize like how you got beaten. It's much, even though the game is very small and compact, like the strategy is more like big picture zone control.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters that much.
I think we need to explain more about how the strategy or RTS side of this works. Nate, could you kind of give us a bit of a rundown on how this game plays?
Yeah, sure. So, as Reagan said, the entire game exists in front of you. This is not a map with like a fog of war or anything. In fact, you can see 100% of information. You can see everything down to the actual cursor that the enemy enemy player is using. So it is this is a game of 100% information, right? Which I think is an interesting part of this, which we can talk about.
It also tends to be extremely symmetrical. Some of the higher level enemy or higher level battles are a little less so, but very often we're talking about a pretty balanced two-sided.
Yeah, there's actually like some most games, but there's most strategy games, but there's some like overlay with chess here, I think. But basically the game is all built out of it's a grid of, is it octagons? Probably.
I think it's hex grid. I think it's a hexagons.
Is it hex grid?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the entire world is broken into hexagons, and you have you start with your citadel. It's sort of your base, and it has a zone of control around it, which is basically like a little wall goes around a set of hexes, which is you can build within those hexes. The way you build is you take your mouse over one of the hexes, and then there are 3 buildings you can build. There's either a mine, which generates the only resource in the game, which is gold. There's a tower, which does what towers do and shoots and defends.
Very tower defense.
Yep. And there's a barracks that generates warriors.
Or here to get more specific, because in this in the main campaign you're exclusively playing as Death, and we'll talk about the story such as it is a little bit later. But you're playing as Death, and so your barracks are actually graveyards. You're planting graveyards. They're sort of mausoleum-looking buildings, and out of those shamble skeleton soldiers.
Yeah, thank you. That's very important coloring. And so because everything is simplified, there's no unit control. You're not saying, okay, a undead warrior costs 5 gold, and I'm going to queue up like 3 or 4 like you would normally do. They come out on a set amount of time. There's an upgrade system. The more upgraded your barracks is, the quicker these undead warriors shamble out of your graveyard. And then what you do is you select the path in which they will attack. So you click on the graveyard, creates a little flag, and then you can drag it. And you can either custom create across the hexagons a path that they'll walk, or you can just go and click on a target. And until that target is destroyed or the barracks is destroyed, a steady stream of undead warriors will just spawn out of that.
Yeah.
And every time you build either a tower or a graveyard, it expands your zone of control, allowing you to build more buildings. So it's a balance, like all RTSs are, of trying to expand your zone of control while also increase the amount of resources you have in order to, overtake your enemy. An interesting thing about the world too is that there are these black crystals that are usually like right in the middle of the map, equidistant from both sides, that if you can take them into your zone of control, they increase the power of your undead warriors, and vice versa. If the other team gets it, their army gets stronger. So there is sort of a rush to take control of these crystals because everything else is equal. So if you can get control of these crystals, now you have a slightly more powerful army, which compounds on itself.
Yeah.
And so your goal is to eventually take down the enemy's citadel, which you do by building enough undead warriors, and having them go and basically attack the enemy citadel until it blows up and you win.
Yeah.
And the whole thing, the grids are maybe like from your building your citadel to their citadel, it's maybe like 15 hexagons across, at the most. Some of them are like 6 to 8. Like these are really small maps, and it doesn't take that long for most of the map to be covered and for the battle to be going.
What I like most about this is how stripped down it is and how that makes it very approachable. RTS games are not something that I've played a whole lot of. Back in the day, I definitely played some StarCraft. I don't think I ever played StarCraft 2 at all, just the original one. And then I've played, a few others along the way. But it's not really a genre that I've engaged with very much, and certainly not in many years. It's just sort of not my thing. And a part of that is that RTSs always have this sort of feeling of like, there's just so much you need to know. Like, it's like chess if there were 500 different types of units, and, different chess sets where you might have 5 people playing, each of whose chess sets look completely different. So my rook, it looks like a dragon and your rook looks like a ox or something. And I'm just supposed to know that these are equivalent in some way and just know at a glance what all of them do. Like, learning a new RTS is really, really daunting. Even if you're just playing through the campaign and not playing any sort of multiplayer, it's just a lot of information to take in. And also the pace is very high. It's the genre that gives us this concept of like actions per second, right? Like the high level StarCraft players or what have you are just doing things at a pace that makes no sense for human fingers to do, right? And it's just a genre that's definitely not an approachable genre, at least as I see it, or hasn't felt approachable for me in many years. But the fact that this strips it down, you have 3 types of units. Your opponent has the same 3 types of units. And the maps are small enough to fit on a single screen without any scrolling whatsoever. So I can see everything that's happening all at once, and I can click on any part of the map at any point. It's not something where I'm constantly having to do a bunch of moving around or what have you. And because the matches are so short, you can iterate on your strategies very quickly without getting frustrated. So, just like something like a very hard platformer, like a Celeste or something, where, maybe you're doing a very, very difficult challenge, and that challenge would be absolutely maddening if it was something that took 6.5 minutes to queue back up and get to. But because you can get back to that challenge again in 10 seconds or 30 seconds, trying it 50 times doesn't feel absolutely maddening. It's a similar kind of vibe here in that each individual match is not 30 minutes long. It's maybe 3 or 5 minutes long. And because the matches are so short, a defeat doesn't feel as demoralizing. And if you are trying things and trying different ways to approach a level, you can iterate much more quickly. So I really, really like everything about this in that way. It's very stripped down, and it's very easy to approach and to just try things and feel like you're making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to lose, it likely will have happened in the first minute or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't literally lost in that first minute or 2, where a big mad king face laughs at you every time you lose, you will have you'll like most RTSs, even though it's all in a much shorter time frame, you can tell usually within like a minute or 2, or I'm behind the curve. There's no coming back. I'm about to lose. And then you're done. And you can start over within, like you just said, within like 10 seconds. You can be right back in that match. And you can just try over and over and over and over, which is good because this game has a pretty steep difficulty curve. You and I both noticed that. The game has a skull, because this game is metal as hell, skull rating system, where whenever you start a match, it tells you like how many skulls difficulty it's going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And skull difficulties 1, 2, and 3. I think I lost twice total across all of those.
I think you had an easier time than I did. I definitely still found some of particularly the 3s, pretty challenging, but not anything where I really felt like, I wasn't throwing my keyboard at the wall or anything.
Yeah, but Skulls 4 and 5, it escalates pretty quickly, and they do some interesting things to ramp up the difficulty. So, Reagan said at the beginning that, most of the time this is symmetrical. One of the most challenging maps in this entire game, it's a 4-skull one. It's actually, you are in a kingdom, your citadel's in the middle, and the enemy has 2 castles, and you're surrounded. Now, you only have to destroy one of those to win, but they're able to attack you from both sides, and that brings a whole new challenge. And they really play around with, how they set up the map. Sometimes the more challenging ones, the enemy will have a much bigger zone of control than you do, so they can expand their kingdom a lot faster. I also noticed that they use delay in this game as a way to modify difficulty. So if you notice in the 1 and 2 skull levels, and maybe even the 3, the enemy doesn't actually do anything until several moments into the game. Their cursor is moving around, but they're not building anything. And so what that does is that gives you a head start in your resource generation. And these games are, any RTS is at the end of the day like a resource management game. And so when you get this head start at your resource generation, it's going to make the game inherently easier. And then as the game ramps up its difficulty, the enemy AI becomes more and more like actually real time and starts the match at the same time that you start the match.
I think the AI in the game is pretty decent, and when you do get into those 4 or 5 level matches, they are making a lot of choices very quickly, and they're not. Yeah. They're not, for example, like letting as soon as their gold total hits whatever they're immediately placing a whatever their next building is the very second they're able to. They're not really doing a lot of waiting around. So you have to get that good too. You have to start taking action very decisively and quickly. And there's a few sort of key strategic things that I kind of gleaned from the game eventually that helped a lot. Maybe Nate can offer better suggestions than I can, but the main things that I'd say about it is, always have an eye on your gold counter and know what your next action is going to be as soon as you have enough gold to take that action. You don't want to be sitting around waiting while gold is ticking. You want to be spending as much as you can, as fast as you can. And then on top of that, a big part of this game is knowing when to place a building and when to remove a building, because you can destroy a building that you've already placed at any point. Any of the buildings, you can just take them right back off of the map, and you get back half of the cost of building them when you do that. So specifically for me with the towers, that was a big part of this, is if I'm trying to expand my territory very quickly, you need to build a tower. And then as soon as you can build another tower a little farther out. And at that point, that tower that's sort of, not on your front lines is basically redundant. So at that point, you can immediately take that tower back and use that gold refund for something else, and also use that plot of land for something else, maybe for a new mine or a new barracks. So being able to quickly kind of pivot, placing towers, but also taking towers away was a big part of my strategy when I started getting into those more difficult levels.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that, the way they balance this is towers are the cheapest thing to make. They're 25 gold. The next most expensive is mines, which are 30 gold. And then the graveyard is 35 gold. So it's 10 more gold in order to make a graveyard instead of a tower. That said, I would caution against unnecessary spending. If you can wait the extra 10 seconds to build a graveyard to expand your territory instead of a tower, that graveyard is going to serve a purpose the rest of the game for you. You can always be streaming out enemies. So if you are constantly sort of building towers just for the sake of expanding your area, then I think you're wasting gold, and it is such a finite and specific resource in this game that it may be more worthwhile just to wait a little bit longer to build a graveyard than another tower.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, all of the buildings do offer some level of defense, because the way that the attacking works, when you send, so if I drag my little line from my graveyard to my opponent's citadel, The little skeleton guys have to march all the way across my little line down to attack that building. But if there's any building in the way, they have to take that down first. They need a clear path all the way to the Citadel in order to really attack the Citadel effectively. And so it takes them a lot longer to take out a tower because the tower is fighting back. But even if there's something like a mine in the way, it slows down attackers. So for me, I really only played with towers at my sort of frontier, my border.
Mhm.
Everything inside my sort of zone of control, if at all possible, I was trying to fill up with something that was generating gold or something that was generating skeletons. Those towers are really just there to kind of block in spots where that's strategic to block.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I think was surprising and funny, and I think they had to make this choice, but your little warriors, when they are on their little path towards whatever they're going to fight, they will walk right past the enemy soldiers. There is no like melee combat in this game. So when the game really gets going and there's like dozens of little armies marching back and forth, it's just it kept cracking me up to see all these soldiers just walking right past each other.
Sort of waving at each other like, hey, I'm going to your castle. Have fun at my castle.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think the game would have been really complicated if they actually met in the middle and fought and you had sort of like a League of Legends like minion control thing. I think that would have been complicated, but
it would have vastly overcomplicated what this was all about. And so it is a really interesting choice though, because RTSs almost always have that sort of, this type of unit engages with this other type of unit in the middle of the battlefield and one or the other of them wins, right? But there's none of that here. This is all about sending your dudes after their buildings, which is really interestingly stripped down. Something that I don't know if this will make sense, but like something about this really reminded me of like a board game played at extremely high speed. Part of that is just the hex style of it and the fact that it's so simplified and sort of takes place in this restricted space. So it sort of feels like a board game board, but it also just kind of has this like something about that aspect of like specifically attacking the things that your enemy has placed. It's not about little dudes clashing swords. It's about deciding strategically what buildings to focus on taking out, basically.
Yes, and there is no randomness to this. So at least the best I could tell, your little dudes do a certain amount of damage to a building, and they're going to approach that building and do that amount of damage or not. Towers shoot on a consistent amount of time. Everything is very set in motion. And just like a board game, you kind of know what's going to happen. I mentioned it at the beginning of this, but the fact that you can see the enemy player's hand.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it. And it's like, actually, that's extremely unusual. You can see, it's as if they have a cursor on screen, just like you do, moving around. So you can kind of imagine you're seeing what they're thinking about.
Yeah, you can see what they build, where they build it. You can see where their hand is going. Like, are they going to build over there? A huge part of RTS games is the fog of war. You don't see what the enemy's doing unless you are there, and even then, you don't see their cursor. Mm-hmm. You see the results of the actions that they're deciding to make. And this, again, everything is visible to you, so you can watch. And in some of the later rounds, it can be really helpful to look and see like, where is their cursor? What are they doing? Where are they trying to build? Because then you can try to be ahead of them.
That's such an interesting choice that it didn't even occur to me while I was playing it that was like, I mean, of course, but it makes it feel, even when you're playing against the AI, like you're playing against another person because you have that aspect of that interaction. It's really interesting.
It made me think of Into the Breach too, which does, that's even more forecasted. You see not only their choices, but what's going to happen before it happens. But I think it's a specific strategy game choice for you to be able to see that level of information. And I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, very much so. I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the campaign, because obviously we've talked about like how battles play out. but like the campaign as a whole. But it might make more sense before we dig into that stuff. I like talking about we can talk about some of the quote unquote boss battles and things. But before we get into that stuff, I think this will make more sense if we take a second to talk about the story, which is funny or funny is the wrong word. It's a fun, weird setup for a story. So I want to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the world of Death Crown, right?
Yeah,
it's wild. So the story of Death Crown is that you are playing as, the game has actually 2 campaigns. It started with a single campaign, but they've released a second campaign as DLC. But basically in the main campaign, you are playing as Death, or Lady Death. And Death is depicted in this game in a really super cool looking way. It's very metal. She's this woman wearing a sort of a shroud-like robe with what I guess is sort of a death shroud around her head that obscures her eyes in a very kind of, I say it kind of reminded me of a kind of a Guillermo del Toro kind of look to it. I don't know specifically. There's something that it reminds me of that's on the tip of my brain and I can't quite place it, but she's a woman in a spiked crown whose eyes are obscured. And she's sort of directing legions of skeletons, with very, very cool looking metal ass shit, right? But she is rising up to fight the humans because presumably this sort of mad king. God, the illustration of the king's face is just gross. It is the king of the humans. Presumably is this really nasty looking old dude who's just got crazy eyes. And so I didn't read the detailed description of the story from the website until after playing the game. Though during the game, I sort of gleaned, okay, Death wants to take this king, but he's not having it. And so we now have a war between the skeletons and the humans in order to, Death wants to take this gross looking weird king's soul or what have you, but now we're fighting over it, which is cool, right? I love that. It's very gothic and wild. If you go to the website, because I don't think it's in the game itself, if you go to the website, there is a description of the story that doesn't add a whole lot to that, but it is an amusing description to read. So I would recommend going and checking that out. But basically, the key thing is that there is apparently a specific artifact, the Death Crown. That this is a war for the Death Crown between Death herself and the king of the humans. And that's pretty much all the story we get. There are some really evocative, cool things on the map that kind of imply that, I mean, maybe this is me reading into it, but it kind of implies that the king has been preparing for this day by assembling I guess, weird artifacts that are there to help him fight Death, and then we get to take them back over the course of the campaign. That's how I interpreted it.
I guess that, yeah, this whole thing was so incomprehensible to me. They make these actually, would you call it 3D cutscenes, right?
Yeah, they're illustrated in a way that is definitely like detailed, and I wouldn't say 3D because I don't think they're doing 3D modeling here, but they're at least they don't feel sort of like sprites. They feel like fully illustrated animated cutscenes.
Well, sometimes some of the later cutscenes, it's like a camera shot because it zooms around and like things are bursting out of the ground and you're seeing its depth and it's like spinning around so you can see all the sides of it. All the while there's like heavy metal guitar shredding in the background,
which is sick.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's really incredible. And honestly, so I think the RTS, I think it is a very successful RTS game, but I think it's this stuff that really makes it sort of like stand on its own and be a really unique little game. It's I was sitting back going, I have no idea what any of this means or what it's trying to tell me, but I'm having a good time watching this. This is hilarious.
Yeah, no, that's what I like about it is like, there is in the kingdom of the humans, there's a giant floating cube chained to the ground, right? And you have to go fight that giant floating cube. And eventually you destroy it and take power from it, which we'll talk about some of those upgrades, I guess. But that's weird, right? What is the cube? We don't know. Why does it matter? No idea. But it is important for Death to destroy the cube before she goes after the king. This is cool, evocative stuff that just, it looks good, and that's all it really needs to do. It just needs to look kick-ass, and it is successful at that.
Yeah, it's fun. And then you mentioned the DLC. I did go and play through a bunch of the DLC, and it's more of the same. However, they add an element of the terrain means more, which was actually a pretty good idea. So they add things like if you build on a hill, it has more fortification. If you build on a swamp, it costs more to make it. They add forests, which you can't build on, but your soldiers can pass through. So it adds an element of like you can sort of go around the enemy because they can't build there. And you play as the humans in the DLC, which is a fun little switch because you've been fighting and destroying those building types the whole time you've been playing before, and now you switch and you are building the like windmills and stone towers that humans make.
That's awesome. I haven't tried the DLC campaign yet, but I'm really glad that exists. It's such a short game that I could definitely see somebody like wanting more, and there is a second campaign that you can just up and download, which is great.
Yeah, I mean that was me. I finished the main campaign in one sitting. You know, I sat down, like I said, it took me like an hour and a half, and I was like, man, that was fun. I actually want more, and I just went, downloaded the DLC and started playing right into that. It was fun. And the only reason I didn't finish that, I think, is because it was like midnight and I was tired, but I would have probably been able to play right through that too.
Yeah. There are some other things that can kind of expand this game. The big one, I guess, would be the local multiplayer. Now, unfortunately, it does not have online multiplayer. And Nate and I tried this. This might not be the game's fault, and probably isn't, but we tried to play the local multiplayer using the Steam remote co-op or remote multiplayer feature that was added with great fanfare pretty recently. And we have good internet connection between the two of us, but we couldn't really make it work. I'm not exactly sure what wasn't working. We were able to connect, but Nate wasn't able to actually play with me. It seemed like it wouldn't allow him to press certain buttons. It was kind of confusing.
It was very strange. Yeah, it's really disappointing because I was frankly looking forward to schooling you, Ray.
Yeah, it would have been a slaughter. But fortunately, I was spared that because it didn't work. And I'm also really not. Because we're socially isolating right now. I don't have any way to play this locally with anyone really. And so I don't really know what the local multiplayer, how that works. I'm curious because it seems like when it's talking about local multiplayer, I don't believe it's talking about networking two computers over a LAN. I believe it's actually talking about two people playing on the same machine. And I'm guessing you have to hook up a second mouse and maybe even second keyboard in order to do it.
That just seems so out of how people play games together that doesn't feel right. But based off of how you and I just experienced it, that seems like the only way it would
think
work.
That's how it's supposed to be done. The game doesn't give you a lot of explanatory text about that, and I don't see anything mentioned in the like webpage about it or anything. So this seems like it would be really fun to play against another human because it's very balanced in that way. It seems like, and it's fast, so it's the kind of thing where I think you could get into a game with somebody pretty quickly and enjoy it. I don't know how it works, and I'm pretty confused about that feature. So
yeah, I was. This was disappointing. So, as I've already said here in this episode, RTSs have been a big part of my life as playing video games, and the primary thing that I play them on is multiplayer. Playing online against other people was always my favorite thing of real-time strategy games. So probably one of my first ever games that I like really loved was the very first Warcraft game. And that really set me off for a long time, really from like, I don't know, like 1998 to like 2000, like honestly till like 2011 or something. I was the only video games I was really playing were RTS games or MMOs. So I played the entire Warcraft series, 1, 2, and 3. Loved every single one of them. Played online. Early RTS online play was a mess and challenging. You had to get on like Warcraft's battle.net servers. It was a mess. And then the Age of Empires series was my favorite. Was probably, if you asked me for a large chunk of my life what my favorite video game was, I'd probably say Age of Empires 2. I played a significant amount of that online to the degree where I was playing like all those crazy custom maps that people would make, where they would like somehow develop a 7-person RPG within Age of Empires 2, and that you'd go on to the server and play these like sprawling RPGs that people had made within Age of Empires. It was really wild. Or like my favorite one was the someone made a Lord of the Rings map, and I think it was 7 players, and everybody would play different parts of the world, right? So you have 2 people that were either Sauron or Saruman, and then everyone else was. And it was like actually super balanced to be 5 against 2, which was crazy challenging to do. I played that like endlessly. Age of Mythology, the like mythic offshoot of the Age of Empires series, Command and Conquer, StarCraft, all of these were like, I played all of them all the time. If I wasn't playing EverQuest or World of Warcraft, those were the games that I was playing. And that is also why there's this like huge hole in my gaming sort of history, which is basically from PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360 through PS3 and or whatever that era is, right? That like basically the first decade of the 2000s of like console games. I didn't have any of that because I was only playing these games on my computer. And so RTS games have been a huge part of my life, but I really haven't played them for a long time. I think the genre itself is like considerably less popular now, unless you're in like South Korea, right?
Yeah. And then, they basically all just play the same game. It's so much less diverse than it used to be.
Yeah, and I think my gaming tastes have changed. You talked about the actions per minute thing. Like that is so far away from like how I want to play a game, even though I like hard games, and Celeste, is one of my favorite games. And I worked my way through those sorts of games. That degree of like requirement of intense, constant focus and execution is like not for me. So I think the genre has moved a little away from what I like. And so when we found this game, which is probably more simple than I think there's still room for me to have a more complex RTS than this. I really enjoyed it really, really quickly. I was like, oh, this is great. I really, really glad that we played it. And I was disappointed that I didn't get to play against you.
Yeah.
Because that would have been fun.
I am also disappointed that you didn't get to play against me and completely school me, because it would have been a slaughter. But
we'll see.
I'm keeping an eye on this.
I guess we'll never know.
Hopefully we'll see like maybe online multiplayer in Death Crown 2 or something like that. That would be nice to see. But because I would love to play this, even if there wasn't a complex like system for matchmaking or something. It would be really nice to be able to just boot into it and play against you without too much fuss. But seems like it just wasn't in the cards for us for this one.
Yeah. Well, this is. I mean, we were trying to do some more research on the developer, but there's not a lot out there. But it certainly looks like this was developed by like 1 or 2 people, right?
Yeah,
and so
it's by Cosmonaut, and that has a creative spelling, including a numeral. So check the website. And he also worked with a friend who he looks like Cosmonaut initially did the development and art, but moved to primarily art and brought in a friend to do the programming. It's looks like he worked on it over the course of starting in about March 2016. So I looked up, I found a post that he made on the TIG forum from a little earlier in the development. Saw some interesting looking versions of the sprites from before the current art, and saw some stuff about his development process. Looks like he's been
Yeah.
working on this for quite a while, and it shows because it's very, very polished. Even though it is sort of like relatively compact thing, it's very, very polished.
No, there was nothing in this game that I was like, oh, that's not like complete or didn't feel right or didn't feel fair. Every time I lost, I just felt like I got beat, which is the right feeling you want in a game like this, and not something where it's like, oh, come on, that's bullshit or whatever. Like it always felt fair. It felt like if I lost, it was because I didn't play well, which is a sign of a polished AI. I think it was really well done, and I also wanted to say too, I would never fault an indie developer for not including online multiplayer.
Yeah, that's just
everything everything I've understood about the development of that can be more challenging than even just developing like a game itself. So
exactly, yeah. No, I'm in no way saying that like counting that against the game in any real way. Like I certainly understand that that's not necessarily something that can be included in every game. I just we are in social isolation right now. Like this has a good campaign, but it would have been nice to play this against a person. But that's definitely not possible. This week.
It's like it'd be nice to have, but I think it's like super cost prohibitive for people to put that into a game.
Yeah,
because you don't know if people are going to use it, and you have to pay for all the server space. And I think about like Towerfall, one of my favorite games of all time. Like I also would have loved if that game had online multiplayer, but it didn't, and it's fine because whenever we're all out of our caves, you can get people together to play that game, and it'll be fine. So yeah, maybe if they make a second one, I hope that they do, or they continue to expand this one. They already did one DLC. I think this is a game that's worth checking out if you have any interest in the RTS, genre. I think that you'll enjoy this game, and if you don't, it's a pretty simple entry point into it.
Yeah. Also, it's available on Steam and itch.io. It is Windows only at this point. I would have loved to have seen at least a Mac port or something, but it is just on Windows, so be prepared for that. And I think it's $9.99 regular price, and it was on sale for $8.99 or $7.99. I don't recall. Anyway, it's not an expensive game. You can pop onto itch.io or Steam and grab this. One slightly funny thing that that they did was that they have a separate version for Steam. For itch. It's the itch.io edition or something like that. And the only thing that it changes is that there is a dragon that flies around and sort of follows you around. I think it follows your cursor. And it does absolutely nothing. It is visual only. It's just there because he wanted to do something special for people buying the game on itch. So if you'd like a cool dragon in your game, then buy the game on itch and support the developer. They get a little extra cash that way.
Yeah, well, I'm disappointed I learned this now because of course I want a cool dragon flying around. That's metal as hell.
Yes, yeah. And I also should mention that if you want the soundtrack, there is a bundle on Steam. You can pay a little extra and get the soundtrack as well.
Cool. I liked the music on this game. It's simple, but it was actually a little denser than I was expecting, considering the rest of the game is so simple. Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed it. I think it's another part of this game that they didn't make too complicated, but I thought it really fit the tone of the game and worked really, really well.
Yeah. So, generally totally recommend this game. Go check it out. And since we've got a little time, let's talk about what's making us happy this week. This is one of those weeks where maybe that's a little harder to come up with than normal.
Yeah, well, it's just I myself, I'm fortunate enough to have a job that has been able to transition 100% to work from home. So I'm spending most of my time sort of in this sort of murky combination of working from home and living at home and just everything being in these same house, same four walls, spending a lot of time sitting in front of my computer. My job normally is very much a people thing. Face to face with people, and now I'm face to face with computer screens all day. Mm-hmm. Which again, I know that I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that, and I'm grateful for it. But it has been a lot of that, and I had an urge, and maybe it was stemmed from Shane in our last episode with making me happy, but I don't know. I had an urge to, for the first time in a long time, play a retro video game. And Reagan, I know you are like, what do you mean, Shane? Nate, I talk about this on all day. All I talk about is retro games. But I bought one of those SNES classics.
Oh yeah.
Like the day they came out, because I never had a Super Nintendo, and there's a bunch of games on there. Particularly wanted to play Earthbound, that's on there, and I just had never taken the time to the 3 minutes to download an emulator and like dig in. And so this will be a good way to get that game and to play it. But I got the SNES Classic, and it's sat in the box. I got it on day one, so whenever that was, a couple years ago. And it's been sitting in the box until just a couple of weeks ago when I finally got it out, set it up, and I looked online, and it's super easy to add games to it. So even though I'm not playing the game I got it for, I'm actually going through and I'm playing Super Mario 3, which was my favorite Nintendo game when I was a kid. And I love Mario games. I've played basically all of the side-scrolling platforming Mario games that are out there that they continue to release, and I think they continue to be good. But I hadn't played this one in a very, very long time. So I was like, I'm going to go through and I want to play through. I want to, essentially 100% Super Mario 3. And to me, that is just beat every level. I don't need to necessarily get all of the secret things, but I want to play through worlds 1 through 9 and actually like complete every level. And so I'm working on that. I'm in world 3 now, so I've only just really got going on it. But it's been a lot of fun. I'm amazed at how many of the little things that I remember, where all the different secrets are. I will also say that I know I like to give you shit, Reagan, for your obsession on recreating the perfect retro gaming experience. But I will say that I noticed within like 30 seconds of playing on the Super Nintendo Classic on my, 4K UHD TV, there is like a fraction of input lag between the controller and Mario, and that it's
infuriating once you don't even have
much,
even if you haven't noticed it throws everything off, because those games were designed with very tight timings.
Yeah, so again, I love the Mario series. I've kept up with it, and timing is 100% of Mario. Mm-hmm. So it is. It's been a little more challenging.
Make sure you've got game mode turned off, or on rather, on your TV, because that's probably the biggest killer, and that's often a per input problem.
So my TV does have game mode, and it auto switches it for my PS4, but it probably isn't recognizing the classic as a game thing.
So double check that for sure, because that's probably the number one killer. And then past that, with the SNES Classic, there's not a whole lot you can do, but it's actually not the worst. It's I don't know how it manages with like running an NES game on that thing, but it's not the laggiest thing in the world once you've got the game mode turned on your screen. It's not too bad.
That's what I mean. It's not horrible, right? It's not like even like a half a second or anything, which would make it like unplayable.
Nate, let me tell you, if you decide you'd like to spend $800 or $900 solving this problem, I can help you with that.
No problem. What? I think I'm good on that. But it is just funny how quickly I went from like, all right, I kind of get what Reagan is going for now with his obsession. But it's been fun. I'm not someone who tends to track in nostalgia very much. I generally would rather play something new than play something again. But it has been fun playing a game that was like a big part of my childhood.
Awesome. That's a really, really great game. I played through that. I've never played the NES version all the way through. I actually, I beat the Game Boy Advance port of that one, which is actually pretty solid, except they added a bunch of sound effects that were a little annoying, but it's a good port, but it adds a saving system, like a more in-depth save system than Mario 3 had, which makes it a lot easier. I've never really gone through it in its sort of original form. Well, I guess what's making me happiest this week is that I finally moved into my new house, which is, this very, suburb ass house here in the Houston suburbs, but it's an awesome house. You can probably hear, hopefully not too bad, that my audio quality might not be quite perfect here because I haven't had a chance to audio treat my office, and the office is larger. Which is good, but also bad because it's echoey. So sorry if the audio quality is a little off this week. But weird timing in that, like, my big plan for this part of my month basically was going to be doing a lot of like buying new furniture and things like that. Now that we've just moved into this new place, and then I can't leave my house. So we're trying to make do, trying to get everything as nice and set up and tidy as possible, given that we just moved in and nothing is quite right, but we're making do. And it's still been a kind of a nice time kind of doing all that nesting in as much as we've been able to. So that's sort of what's been making me happy this week.
Yeah, I know you've moved a lot over the last 5 years. I'm hopeful that this one will be a more permanent residence, at least for a little while.
Yeah, the plan is this is it. Maybe not until we're all dead and buried or what have you, but this is the plan to live here for a good long while. And so we kind of overbought. We bought more house than we probably needed immediately, with plans for future, needing extra space in various different ways. So.
Yeah, your CRT TV collection, you really needed that extra room just to make sure.
I do plan to expand it, so I needed to make sure I had that extra space for my large and growing collection of CRTs. I guess actually, the one other thing that's been making me happy lately that I haven't mentioned on the show is that I did successfully recap or replace not all, but a large number of the capacitors in the two PVMs, the big professional CRT monitors that I picked up at an electronics recycler a little while ago. And another thing that's been making me very happy has been playing on that recently, successfully refurbished monitor. It looks so good, guys.
It's a big day. It
looks so good. Okay. Yeah. That aside, listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. And I hope that you are well, and I hope that you are not just surviving, but keeping your mental health together and all of that. No one's thriving right now, Nate. We're all just doing the best we can. But I hope that listeners, that you're doing okay. If you like the show, the best way to support us is to head to patreon.com. And if you can kick us even just $1 a month, that gives you instant access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games that we're playing. The conversations that happen on this show begin there, and we would love to have those conversations with you. If you want to suggest a game for the show, obviously Discord is a good way to do that, but you can also find us on the internet at www.theshortgame.net. We've got a contact form there, or you can go to twitter.com/_shortgame, @_shortgame on Twitter. And you can also find me on Twitter. I'm @ReaganK. And Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me at twitter.com/NateSTL.
Thank you, Nate. And listeners, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.